Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well still, and welcome to tonight's second half. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to the second half, shall we?
Morning, Jeff. First, I'd like to say I've been a long-time supporter of your channel, and I am continuously captivated by your narration and videos. Anyway, I had a Dogman sighting back in 2010. I was working in an ambulance at the time with a partner, and only recently did my partner divulge his side of the story to me. It was initially a Reddit post created years back. With an addition to my partner's information, I've rewritten it to something that is easier to read to an audience. After the sighting, I became obsessed on trying to figure out exactly what we saw, as my ambulance partner wanted nothing to do with it, completely shutting the topic down anytime I brought it up. Until about a week ago, I finally got him to cave and tell me what he saw that night. I've only shared this a couple of times, and it's the first time it's been shared with the additional info. It's unique, and at least I think so. It takes place in Connecticut. Connecticut is not exactly Dogman Central. I hope this sighting serves you well. It will be attached below, hopefully in a non-messy format. I'm on mobile and apologize if it comes out wacky. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Keep fighting the good fight, my friend. So the first part will be my point of view, the original Reddit post edited with some details that I left out. Hopefully it reads less like a Reddit post and more like something that you can share with my fellow Dogman fam. My work partner that night refused to acknowledge or even talk about the event for almost 9 years. The second part will be from his point of view. So really quick, before we jump into the encounter, the only thing he asked was to keep his partner's name out of it. So I will be using a different name. Here goes. I'm a former paramedic who plays EMT on the weekends now. I've always thought if I were to experience something paranormal at work, it would be in any of the number of ambulances I used to work on account of all the souls that have passed through. My partner and I, this night, weren't that lucky. I used to work in a moderately sized city in central Connecticut, and our company covered surrounding towns and had contracts to cover inter-hospital transfers and things like that, much further away from our 911 coverage area. The city itself is only a couple 100,000 people with suburbs and a river valley, and then rural woods beyond. Nothing special. We had to respond to a fringe of our coverage area in another town in another corner of the state, literally nicknamed the Quiet Corner, because it is so low populated, very heavy wooded. After almost getting there, we wound up being canceled by a closer unit en route. It was 4:30 in the morning. on a Wednesday in autumn of 2010. Where we were turning around was a notorious one-stoplight town. The ride back to civilization from where we were was about a 20 to 30 minute trip, but it's a long, straight, two-lane state route. Dim lights, thick forest on both sides with an occasional residence and very few small businesses. We turned off of State Route 44 and onto a road named Pumpkin Hill Road, which after a couple of more turns onto side streets was going to drop us off further down 44 in the direction we needed to be going. Surrounding us was state forest and a couple of dirt roads, a couple of small rivers, a small lake, and not an awful lot of houses. The houses there are few and far between, very spaced out. I was riding in the passenger seat with my face in the laptop writing our canceled tag, mentally preparing to go home after a long night, and my partner said, "Do you see that?" I began to slow down. Pumpkin Hill was a gravel road that's fairly narrow, and we had a jet black forest on both sides of us. Visibility in front of us was clear, but to the sides you couldn't see past a 5 or 6 foot tall hedgerow that lined the road just behind the guardrail. The cab was illuminated by my laptop, so I shut it and looked up, squinted a little, and there I saw it, only 100 feet or so in front of us. A very large dog. A very large dog that's silverish gray with straight cropped ears that had little tufts atop of them, walking away from us ever so slowly with a very unusual gait, almost like it was limping. Damn thing had to be 4.5 feet at its shoulders. My partner slows to a crawl, thinking it may be hurt. Let's see if it's got a tag or a collar. We surely thought such a magnificent beast had to have an owner. As we slowed to a crawl, that's when stuff started to happen that I will never unsee or forget to this day. I started believing that not all things are what they seem. The idle of the ambulance isn't its usual roar. We're just creeping at about 5 miles an hour, gaining. I was on the passenger side, and it was on my side of the road. The plan was for my partner to put the flashers on and me to whistle or hoot to see if our new friend was acclimated to humans and needed help, or if he was street tough, and to let him on his way. We closed the 100-foot gap to around 25 to 30 feet. As we closed our distance, and right at the 10-yard mark or so, my partner and I simultaneously got the sense of dread. I was suddenly very aware of how much stuff I was in, and my blood turned cold. The hair on my arms and neck stood on end, and my vision narrowed. My heart started pumping well over 120 beats per minute. That creature stood up. He just stood up. Not like a domesticated dog or a bear or a domesticated cat would. Their movements are kind of awkward when they stand, and they are usually pretty quick to go back down onto all fours after a couple of steps. And we don't have black bear here, but this definitely was not a black bear. It was far too large. This creature was meant to stand up, and he did it as fluently as you or I could. My view of it was from behind, and this thing's shoulders would put an NFL defensive end to shame. It was a massive creature. My partner stopped the truck. The beast cocked its head to the side ever so slightly, to the left, revealing a single yellow/green glowing eye. Then turned to my side, the right side of the woods, and bolted. It was over as soon as it had started. What my partner and I have always called a werewolf, we estimated it to be around 7.5 feet tall. Our ambulance is a little over 13-foot clearance, and the tufts of its ears lined with where about our emergency lights were on the front of the top of the truck. The top of its head ended to where about the windshield ended. Its shoulders were easily twice as wide as a man's, maybe 4.5 to 5 feet. Its back muscles were well developed, and it had tapered waist which led down to a bushy 3 or 4 foot long tail. I keep referring it to he because it had enormous testicles. How he walked around with those things, I have no idea. Its quadriceps, if I had to guess, were the size of a man's waist. Anywhere between 34 and 40 inches, its legs bent backward like a canine's, and I could make out an Achilles heel, and massive clawed feet. The upper body's details were more alarming to take in. The ears were cropped like a Doberman's. They stood straight up, and the tufts atop of them were a few inches tall on their own. When it snapped its head to the side to acknowledge us, its ears laid flat back on the top of its head. It was all business when he did that. I got a perfect profile view of its face, and it had a rigid, straight cheekbones which led away from its face and towards a gigantic muzzle. The socket around its eyes looked incredibly human, and the eye itself was probably the size of a racquetball, and it wasn't reflecting light from our scene headlights. It was definitely glowing a yellowish green. The muzzle could have been a foot long, and it had big old shiny, maybe a wet dog nose at the end. Its mouth was partially open when it turned its head, and then it looked like it had swallowed. I only caught a second or two long glimpse of its mouth. Its gums were black, and it had a dark, maybe purplish tongue. Its teeth were a bright yellow, and it had 2 pairs of fangs. They weren't incisors or inside of its mouth. It had a pair of fangs that sat at the front and outside of his mouth. And at the front and bottom of his mouth, with his mouth closed, you could still see them. These teeth were designed for puncturing, ripping, and tearing. Off of its incredibly shoulders were its arms, which were jacked and almost twice as long as its legs. The claws of this werewolf ended around to where its knees were, and its claws had to be 5 to 6 inches long. Claws were attached to digits at the end of its hand and did not look anything like a paw. Its forearms were longer than what its humerus would be and made up the majority of its arm itself. Above the elbow were its biceps, which, if I had to guess, were somewhere around 40 inches. And well defined. Watching it stand up so fluently made sense looking back, as it obviously used its power in its legs and did sort of a push-up with its gigantic long arms to spring into that position. The thing that always bothered me, though, was that little head tilt. I get the sense of dread before it stood up. Like my mind and body knew something bad was about to happen, but it didn't know what. It was almost telepathic, if that makes sense. I just got this feeling from this werewolf like, I know you mean well, move on, and I was never here. Then it vanished. The expression on its face was not anger or a scowl. It was more of an indifference annoyance. Like it was saying, "Aw man, who the hell are you? I have to deal with this now?" When it rolled to the right and bent its legs and just leapt straight over the hedgerow and guardrail. It didn't do a run to start or even squat that much. He just turned and jumped. He kept his whole body elongated, so from the standing position, it went at least 6 to 7 feet in the air, far enough in the back and over to not be easily seen anymore. Another easy 10 or 15 feet. After that, my partner punched it and we drove fairly recklessly, getting off that gravel road and back to one with some street lights. I would have never asked him to slow down. We both wanted to get out of there, and we fled with the sense of urgency. I've seen many canines stand on their hind legs. I've never seen a hellhound sprint with precision over a guardrail and brush that messed with my head other than that night. After a lot of research, I came upon legends of Michigan Dogman, the Beast of Bray Road. The only problem is I live in Connecticut. We are not known for our Bigfoot sightings or wacky cryptozoological stories. The town of Pomfrey, Connecticut, which is close by to the town we were in, does have some interesting wolf folklore, though. A park named Wolf Den State Park, the short version of that, is at General Israel Putnam, and yes, that General Putnam, the Revolutionary War semi-hero, killed the last wolf in Connecticut, and it's Wolf Den, I think, around 1764, before the conflict. The story, as I recall, wolves in Connecticut were hell on livestock, and the settlers had killed the last of the she-wolf's cubs and her mate. The story goes she slaughtered livestock and stalked and attacked people, not to eat, but to kill. One morning she massacred over 70 sheep, and Israel Putnam was tasked with putting her down. He tracked her to her den and did so. The wolf den is still there to this day. There have been Dogman sightings close by in Massachusetts, and even legitimate gray wolf sightings. In the last decade or so, wolves have been finding their way down New England from Canada. I don't know what I believe in, and it's certainly not werewolves, but I totally saw something that really looked like a werewolf just that one time. My partner and I had worked together in that ambulance for 3 years at the time of the sighting. We knew each other pretty well, and as alarming as the events that transpired in front of us were, there was something off about Ben for weeks after that sighting. The ride back to operations, we just couldn't believe what we had seen and exchanged things like, "WTF was that? I don't know, a-hole, I saw the same thing you did. Did you really? Did that just really happen? I can't believe that happened." After we fueled the truck, we punched out, and the next time I saw him was Thursday night, for our last tour of the week before our 3 days off. When I showed up, he had notified me that he had called dispatch and requested to be posted to downtown the entire evening, not wanting to leave the confines of the inner city. Not an unusual or odd request. Some people prefer the busier assignments, and we definitely did. But it became a habit for Ben, and as weeks and months went by, we were never sent out to suburbia for a call after dark for the rest of our time together. I thought I was just shaken up, as he was, but something was sitting sideways with the way he was acting, and every time I approached him to talk about it, he would immediately dismiss the topic. He would be stoic, quiet, or change the subject entirely, leaving an odd vibe I had never felt around my work brother before. Absolutely nothing changed about our job performance or our friendship, but after a while, I suspected my partner had either seen something like this before or had seen something that I hadn't that night. After years of patiently prodding him and asking him what was wrong, he finally disclosed what was bothering him so much about the sighting. And it turned out to be the latter. 9 years later, I have his permission to relay his point of view. Our ambulance was a 2008 AEV box truck. It had a 13-foot clearance, and Ben is 6'5", I'm 5'10". But when seated in the cab, sitting up and facing forward at the top of our heads are probably somewhere between 7.5 to 8 feet off the deck. As a passenger, you can't see an awful lot out of the mirrors, but as a driver, you can see down the side of the truck and pretty well behind you. There's also a mobile data terminal that controls several functions, including lights, sirens, scene lights, and dispatch response. It also had a 4-screen camera that showed a backup camera, which was mounted on the top of the back, pointing downward at an angle, 2 side cameras, which covered the outside ends of the ambulance, and, of course, a patient compartment camera, which was the only one that recorded. When you were in the driver's seat, you had pretty much a 360-degree coverage. As a passenger, the most you could see out of is the front mirrors was jack nothing, especially since Ben is a giant and we fought over mirror angles all the time, as relayed to me by him. Ben said that when he completely stopped, he was looking at the werewolf in front of us, but had a pit in his stomach convincing him that he wasn't actually looking at us when it turned its head. My eyes were fixated in front of us on Wolfman number 1, Ben trusting his instincts, in which I did not notice him doing because I was busy trying not to urinate myself already, had the MDT angled right at him and started cycling through the cameras and turned the side and rear scene lights. The scene lights are not the emergency lights. Scene lights are these bright white/blue hued LED lights that are so bright you could probably land a space shuttle from orbit with them. When he did that, he noticed that our friend in front of us was in fact not alone. Ben caught a glimpse of 2 of them behind us and one coming up my side of the ambulance. The 2 behind us he described as coyote tan and on all 4, standing right in what would be our blind spot. The way the camera is angled, he said, all he could see were the tops of their heads, the tops of their torsos, their arms, shoulders, and their massive pawed hands. He describes them exactly as the first one was described, except with color variation. When he turned the scene lights on, they bolted to the right side of the road, out of view of camera. This is where it gets a little creepy. After watching their shadow and movements going to the right toward the tree line, Ben cycled the MDT monitor to the starboard side camera, hoping to catch them and see if they were going to advance towards us or run in the brush. Mind you, this is all happening quickly in a matter of seconds. When he cycled the camera, what he saw was another Dogman. This one was on its hind legs, blacker than the blackest black. So massive, it was filling the entire monitor, and with its left hand was trying to open the door to the patient compartment area. Ben had hit the scene lights and cycled the camera and lost sight of the 2. As he didn't see how too much from the camera view with its yellow eyes and grinned at him, with the camera view, he looked at the passenger side mirror, and that's when he said the black Dogman was looking right back at him with his yellow eyes and grinning. He did see the coyote tan Dogman leap over the brush behind the grinning one. He stated, "Danny, if you rolled your window down and reached your arm out, you guys would have been shaking hands." When he told me this, almost a decade after the incident, my blood ran cold again. He didn't discuss it for years. And all of this time I had no idea one was less than 5 feet behind my right shoulder. He said the grinning Dogman was a sinister-looking SOB. It was clearly trying to stealthily open the patient compartment door. On the right side of the bus, lucky the locks engage when the vehicle is in motion. When it was staring at him in the mirror, its toothy grin, it moved its head. He saw the Dogman we initially spotted jump over the brush, then followed suit. My partner said it stopped grinning and almost looked like it was having a chuckle. Honestly, it looked like an a-hole. It turned to the right and jumped over the guardrail with the rest of his buddies. As we drove away, I rolled my window down, and we did hear very loud, almost like chirping or yapping. It was almost like what hyenas sound like. When I did that, Ben said, "Roll that back up. What's the matter with you?" as we sped away. The whole event couldn't have lasted more than a minute and a half, from the first time we spotted the first one 100 feet down the road. Knowing my partner's side of the story now after all of these years, what bothers me the most now which is probably what had bothered him so long, where did the other 3 come from? What was their plan? What if I was someone alone in a Prius or a Mini Cooper? Would I be wolf bait? Were they out on a prowl, looking to ambush a motorist, just messing with people? They're so intelligent to move in blind spots and have a distraction in the front like a classic ambush. After having thought, I settled my nerves over the even 11 years, or over the even years now. 11 years now, sorry. I have many more questions I'm afraid I'll never have the answers to. That's what my partner swears happened that night. We saw the wolf beast on Pumpkin Hill Road in a sleepy little corner of Connecticut in our ambulance. Now, why that encounter sticks in my head the way it does is because, first and foremost, I believe it was almost my very first interview I had ever done. I think it was, actually, to be honest with y'all. But they were tactically in sync. If you really think about it, classic ambush. Have someone in front, the distraction, the 2 in the back to kind of, keep you boxed in, and one coming up the side, the real mean one. The look it gave Ben when he was sitting in the driver's side does not show a playful Dogman, even though it kind of grinned at him. It was almost like a grin, and this is how I feel. I wasn't there, so I'm just letting you know how I feel. That grin was almost like I could take you at any time. Anytime we could have. And then the what if. What if I was a guy in a Prius or a Mini Cooper, alone? My car broke down. Dr. Nancy Shaw was killed on Skyline Lane in Georgia. Her car was found on one side of the road with the door open. She was in a ditch, torn apart. The car was still running when the law enforcement officer found her. I was told this encounter before Dr. Nancy Shaw's attack even happened. And it fit the bill, if you ask me. I'm almost imagining how it went down for this poor woman. I got one more encounter out of that great state of Connecticut to share with you all. Let's get into it. Hey Jeff, I told my wife and my son about the Putnam County encounter in Connecticut with the EMT worker. The reason why I told them about it is it's very close to my sister's home. She lives in West Hartford in Connecticut, which is very close to Putnam. My sister's house is in the mountains, and she has a reserve in the back of her house. She lives in a community of maybe 20 houses or so. It's a very affluential community, so the houses are huge, with at least an acre of land. They frequently see bear, coyote, and all kinds of wildlife in their community. When you drive into my sister's neighborhood, there's a patch of trees on either side of the road. Then you drive up a steep hill that twists and turns as you drive. There are houses on either side of the street as you drive up. But when you turn off that main road, I believe it's called Asylum Avenue, you enter into her community with trees on either side, like I mentioned. Well, one night, my wife and son had went out to get some food with everyone. And when they came back and entered the neighborhood, they saw what they thought was a coyote. But my son said it was far too large. He said it was light colored but huge. He said the animal gathered itself and jumped across the street in one leap. He said it looked like it was floating as it jumped. The road it jumped across is 2.5 cars on it. So it's a pretty wide street. He said as it landed on the other side of the street, it was gone. He said he did not think anything of it, but when I told him of that Putnam encounter, it all came back to him. My son was 10, but he's very smart. He's mature for his age. This happened a few months ago around Thanksgiving. When he told me this, I was shocked, speechless. I never thought I would ever hear someone having an encounter, let alone my son. My wife said she saw it, but not as quite as well as my son. That's it, Jeff. Nothing exciting but an encounter. Again, I am shocked and speechless by this. If you have any questions, ask, and I will have my son answer anything for you. He is excited that I'm writing you about this encounter. Keep up the good work. S. And then I get another email from S. Hey Jeff, thank you for reading my son's encounter. I have a small update. This weekend my sister was down from Connecticut, so we could all get together as a family since the restrictions were lifted a bit in my state. I live in southern New Jersey, just outside of Philly. So it turns out that my son and wife were not the only people in the car that night. They saw the Dogman jump across the road. My sister, the one that lives in Connecticut, and my niece were in the car as well. They all saw it. When they got back into the house, they told everyone in the house about it. But I was taking a shower, so I didn't hear about it. My sister dismissed it as a coyote. My niece thought maybe it was a black bear, since it was much bigger than a coyote. And my son said it was neither. It was way too big for a coyote and too fast and fluid for a bear. He also said that it was the way the light and the color of he also said it was way too light in color, to be a black bear. Everyone dismissed it in the house because they could not identify what the animal was. When I asked my sister about it, she said she knew it was not a coyote, and she thought there was something strange about the animal and what it did. She said she had never seen anything like it, but she told herself it was a coyote because, to be honest, the whole thing scared her. She said she had not seen anything like that before. There is the confirmation that something is close to my sister's house in the mountains of West Hartford. At the end of July, we will be going to her house to visit. If anything happens, I will make sure you know. You can use my name anytime, by the way. I believe in these things, and no one can make me feel any different. Keep doing what you do, my friend. I got a lot of people to listen to you and grow their knowledge, just like you have done for me. P.S. I live 20 minutes away from one of the hot spots. I live in Hamilton, New Jersey. If you ever feel up to it, you're welcome to come and explore. I got my neighbor to listen to you, and she is an ex-police officer. She wants to go and test her luck with you. LOL. Sean.
All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives people a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free. Just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.